Welcome back, all. This is the Brothers Mahoney. I am Michael,
And I'm James.
and today we are discussing one of the more interesting pieces, I think, of Doctor Who history, the 1996 made-for-TV movie titled Doctor Who. This was a co-production by both the BBC and Fox back in 96 when they were hoping to, restart a new series following the cancellation of the original series back in 1989. So
An American series.
yeah, which I think would have been absolutely atrocious, but that's neither here nor there. And the movie was written by Matthew Jacobs, which isn't a name I particularly know. Despite it being a co-production between the BBC and Fox, the movie was filmed in Canada, generally speaking, so I found that sort of amusing. And it first aired in May 1996. And I forget, was it only released officially on DVD with the release that we happened to pick up?
Well, you have to remember it came out in the UK a lot earlier than it came out in the US, at least on DVD. In the US on DVD, it only came out in 2011 as unofficial. Well, I don't know, there were probably bootlegs, but as far as I know, we got it the first time when we could get it, which would have been Doctor Who Special Edition. I'm not quite so also special about it, but there are two commentaries, so that's something.
And actually, this is the movie that introduces Paul McGann as the Eighth Doctor, though it also has Sylvester McCoy in it, so at least we get to finish out the Seventh Doctor going into the Eighth, which I think comes with its pros and cons, but we'll probably touch on that a bit later.
I personally think there are more pros, but
Yeah, I do too. It's sort of complicated, especially if they're trying to make this like a more of an American type thing, but
yeah, no, I don't think you can do it and also make it a movie. That's the problem. A miniseries would have been fine, but I don't think you can do a movie and also keep McCoy. But
yeah, and I'll just read the plot straight from the back of the DVD box. Like James said, it's the special edition, and we'll have the copy up on screen. The Doctor is returning home to Gallifrey with the remains of his arch-nemesis, the Master. First off course, the TARDIS arrives in San Francisco on New Year's Eve, 1999, where the Doctor is critically wounded in a gangland gun battle. At the local hospital, Dr. Grace Holloway fights and fails to save his life. Later, in the morgue, the Doctor wakes up a new man, but he is not the only one. The Master has also found himself a new body. As the clock counts down to the start of the new millennium, can the Doctor stop his oldest enemy from destroying our life on Earth?
that plot sounds a little more epic than the movie actually feels.
You ain't lying. So, cast-wise, honestly, there's only a handful of names that are worth mentioning. Like I said, Sylvester McCoy comes back as the Seventh Doctor for a bit, but we primarily follow Paul McGann as the Eighth Doctor. We have Daphne Ashbrook as Grace Holloway, Yi Ji So as Chang Li, and Eric Roberts playing a new rendition of the Master. I think the movie, and I think both of us think this, the movie's a bit messy. Certainly, it's interesting. This is the second time we've seen it?
Yes, I believe we have only seen the movie as a whole 2 times now. We watched half of it once, but on the whole, it's only been 2 times.
Yeah, so it can be a bit messy, but I do think you can see glimpses of Paul McGann being a really good Doctor. I mean, it's because it's a regeneration story, which is also probably a mistake. Those moments are sort of few and far between, but you can see glimpses of McGann being a good Doctor. I think later on, and certainly during this time on Big Finish, I think people grew to appreciate his incarnation. And unfortunately, James and I haven't actually listened to any of his Big Finish material yet, though we do have a sizable amount of his early stuff. We have, however, seen Night of the Doctor, which was like an 8-minute short. I can't pretend I remember when it was released because I don't. But it was an 8-minute short, and it features Paul McGann's Doctor, and you can see what his Doctor could have been like had he had that production value behind him. I think it's a really powerful showing for him, and it's sort of sad that we didn't see this Doctor, McGann's Doctor, on screen more often, because I do think there's a suave personality to him. So I'm really eager I'm looking forward to some of his audios once we get to them.
Yeah, the Night of the Doctor came out, I think it was 2013, because it was a prelude to the Day of the Doctor, the huge special they did, which I have always thought was more than little overrated. Yeah, and it was nice to see Paul McGann. He showed up in The Power of the Doctor in one of the hallucination. I don't know if I would call it hallucination, but in one of those moments with Jodie Whittaker's Doctor. And as much as those actually annoyed me, not so much them appearing. I actually really liked all of that. There was fan service to the max of the classic series. And I am very convinced, I've seen a couple of people say it, that while The Power of the Doctor might have been a good fan service episode for fans of the classic series, it was not at all a good ending for the 13th Doctor. So, but hey, she is getting an audio range coming up. I think it's going to be released in the next year on Big Finish, maybe sooner. So I guess 13th Doctor fans have that to look forward to. But yeah, it was really nice seeing Paul McGann there. And of course, if you remember, Paul McGann is the only one in the sequence there who didn't show up with robes on. And when questioned, he was like, I don't do robes.
He's a man of the people.
Yeah, he was... could you imagine that Doctor dealing with Gallifrey? Now, I guess we're going to have to, because he has like 4,000 stories dealing with the Time War. But as Michael said, we have not listened to any of his yet, and certainly not none of those. So that will be fascinating. I think it's easy to say.
And I think it's really fascinating what this movie tries to do. It opens up with narration by Paul McGann. So it's not McCoy's narration. It's narration, I guess, looking back on the events that happened in the movie. And apparently, what we learn is the Master, who is naturally a long-time classic Who fan. Apparently, the Master had a trial on Scar. Now, I don't know exactly how Scar is still a thing, because I guess from my understanding, the Doctor tricked Daleks into destroying it back in Remembrance of the Daleks. But I imagine even by 96 that had probably been retconned somehow, though I have to admit I don't know. I don't know how, but I would imagine it probably was.
Yeah, I don't believe the Daleks appeared in any... I could easily be wrong, but I don't believe the Daleks appeared in any of the 7th Doctor Voids and New Adventures.
Yeah, I honestly, I really have no idea. That could have been a rights issue for all I know, but...
Probably, I mean, with the Daleks, it always seems to be a rights issue. I mean, we saw that even here when the voices were absolute garbage. They were worse than the Dalek voices were worse than the ones in
Day of the Daleks.
Yeah, Day of the Daleks.
It did have a sort of a cheap aspect to it. So what we have here is a trial with the Master being held on Scar, and I'm already sort of confused, to be honest, because I'm not sure why the Daleks would try the Master.
I'm not sure why they would hold a trial, but then I'm not sure how they have a parliament. So,
yeah, so I guess I'm just confused, and the Master's executed by the Daleks, so I guess he's found guilty of whatever crimes he was being convicted on. And it's worth noting, all of this is prior to the Time War, so any of the shenanigans that any of these people get up to during the Time War would probably not relate to any of this stuff.
Although with how time works, who knows?
Well, yeah, I mean, because the Daleks have had time travel since the Chase, so God knows what they have been doing. But the Master's executed, but apparently one of the Master's last wishes was to have the Doctor take his remains back to Gallifrey, which is how the movie opens, with the Doctor taking the remains of the Master on the TARDIS, and then you get a beautiful rendition of the Doctor Who theme song.
Yeah, no, it's actually done quite well. I really do. The many questions the beginning has set aside. The way that Paul McGann says, that was a request I never sort of granted. And then it goes into the orchestra Doctor Who theme, which sounds so good. It works really well for the movie.
Yeah, I mean, it's a corny opening, but it's also worth mentioning. It's like a mid-90s TV movie, and I sort of like it. I mean, it's confusing if you think about it in context, but who needs to think about this type of stuff? Just sit back and enjoy, bruh. And actually,
I hate that philosophy, but...
Well, speaking of sitting back and enjoying, it seems to be what the Doctor's up to during this time in his life.
Yeah, he looks... One, the TARDIS is swag. I'm sure somebody saw that at some point. But the TARDIS looks amazing. It has this really cool gothic theme going on. It's way bigger, the council room, than we've ever seen it before, as far as I know. Certainly, the TV series never had the money to make it look this big.
I'll say the TARDIS is actually quite spacey in Gatwa's time, but it's just out like empty space. Aside from, a jukebox.
I mean, that's fair. I was talking about the classic series. I mean, the Warden one during that one Tom Baker season looked downright claustrophobic.
Yeah, that's some character to it.
Yeah, that's something.
Yeah, but this rendition of the TARDIS seems to be very comfy. Like the Doctor sitting back in this really nice looking armchair. Now he's reading H.G. Wells' The Time Machine, which is sort of,
I don't know. I find it too on the nose. I find it, I don't know. I find it kind of absurd, but whatever.
I mean, maybe the Doctor particularly enjoys the book, and who are we to tell him what he can and can't enjoy? I don't know.
Well, if you remember, he might H.G. Wells, if I'm not mistaken.
I imagine he might have great many people, but I can't remember when he was.
Well, okay, I mean, that's true, but I'm pretty sure H.G. Wells showed up in the Sixth Doctor story.
Timeless?
Yes, Timeless.
What's the H.G. Wells? I thought it was someone else, but I'll take your word for it.
I think it might not have been H.G. Wells. It was someone anyway. Maybe it was H.G. Wells, and all of our listeners can come and correct me for being a bad Timeless fan. When actually, I quite like Timeless, for the record.
Yeah, that's a negative reputation, and I'll be honest, I guess we've only seen it once, but I don't understand why it has a bad reputation, so I'll be curious about revisiting that one. But yeah, the Seventh Doctor looks like he's sort of just resting largely. I'm not entirely clear as to why it's taking a while to travel between Skaro to Gallifrey. Like, you'd think it would take like no more than like a minute or so for the TARDIS to rematerialize.
I mean, to be fair, it is the Doctor going to Gallifrey. When has he ever done that quickly?
I guess, yeah, to be even more fair, Gallifrey probably has some type of... Like, you can't just go to Gallifrey unannounced. Things will begin to happen.
Yeah, they have like a transduction barrier, if I'm not mistaken. And I remember that from my recent re-listen to the Science of Time. So, there we go. Audio knowledge.
It's nice to have some occasionally light audio knowledge, since God knows we do have a lot of it.
Well, this is true, and also it is worth noting, and that's a disappointment, but I can see why it did happen, that this is actually the first we've seen of Gallifrey, really. We never actually get to Gallifrey in the movie. God knows what that would have looked like. It's the first we see, really, or hear of Gallifrey since the trial of a Time Lord, because during his entire run, we never saw Sylvester McCoy on Gallifrey.
Which is probably a good thing, because I can't imagine Sylvester McCoy would have cared much for that society.
If there are any Seventh Doctor stories that take place involving Gallifrey in audio form, I cannot wait for it. But I have to say, from my recollection, because I've looked through a lot of what Big Finish has to offer, I've never seen a Seventh Doctor Gallifrey story. So I might never get that wish fulfilled.
I have to imagine it happened somewhere, but I really wouldn't know. So, yeah, the Doctor looks like he's living a pretty comfortable life. Unfortunately, much of the Master's request for the Doctor to take his remains back to Gallifrey seems to be a trap. So, no idea how Master is still alive in some type of... I don't even know what you would call it. It's sort of like a silver liquid.
Like a protoplasmic slag, basically. Yeah. And to be absolutely fair to the Master, him somehow not being dead is the most mastery thing of all time.
Yeah, you're not wrong. I mean, we all remember Deadly Assassin.
I don't know how much you remember Deadly Assassin.
Just a bit, but I remember enough. Point being, the Master has his ways. And the Master escapes, leading the Doctor to do an emergency landing on Earth, circa 1999, as the plot says, a couple of days before New Year's Day.
Which is interesting because this movie came out in 1996. So this technically takes place in the future. I don't know if they did anything to make San Francisco look like it was 3 years in the future. Maybe they figured, it's nothing, nobody cares, whatever. Which is what I guess they did. I don't live in San Francisco, I have no clue.
You know the funny thing to me, because this was made in 1996, so there was still, 4 years out, there were no references to Y2K. Because you have to imagine a place like San Francisco, there would be a bunch of people. I mean, I think across the country, who's to say how large it was? But there were quite a few people worried about the whole Y2K thing. So I find it funny because this is sort of a few steps in the future. It's actually, in a way, almost loses some relevance.
Well, yeah, that's the danger of doing things like this. Like, you can do things in the far future, then you can do things in the it's going to happen soon, but not soon enough for us to be affected by it, story-wise. And then you can do things just 3 years in the future. Imagine what Doctor Who stories take place in 2020 that don't mention COVID.
Yeah, that's another good point.
I don't know any off the top of my head, but I'm sure there are some that exist.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's always been an issue with, time travel media in general. Yeah, so I guess the unfortunate thing, though, for Sylvester McCoy's Doctor, I think we've mentioned before, that McCoy's one of our favourite renditions of the Doctor, despite his somewhat unfavourable time on TV.
I'm not sure when we could have mentioned this piece. I'm not sure we've covered the McCoy story yet.
Well, the film angle. We've covered some audio and such.
Oh, okay, I was thinking of classic. You are right, we have covered a few audio ones. In fact, I think our next audio one we're covering is also a McCoy one.
Yeah, that's how I was encouraging. So yeah, McCoy's one of our favourite Doctors, and just the way he goes out is somewhat disappointing. So pretty much the Doctor lands at TARDIS. It's like an emergency landing. Yeah, so for some reason, I guess he's just panicked about the Master getting loose. He doesn't really track his surroundings, and to be fair, I guess the Doctor sometimes just doesn't do that.
It's not how he travels.
Unfortunately, it's a really bad time, because as he walks out of the TARDIS, he sort of lands in the middle of some type of gang feud. The back of this DVD says a gangland GAN battle. Now, I've never heard something described as a GAN battle before, but maybe that's how they describe GANs over in the UK. I don't know, but it's sort of strange to me.
Yeah, to us, we just call it the day in the supermarket.
Oh, snap. Like, it's like a day in 5th grade, bro. It's a GAN battle.
Yeah, that's what it seems like nowadays.
God bless America, am I right? So the Doctor lands in the middle of this gang conflict, I guess you could call it, between Chang Li, which, as we said earlier, is played by Yi Ji So, and some unnamed gangsters with semi-automatic weapons. I guess it looked like machine pistols, maybe. They were guns.
Probably.
Yeah. And the Doctor stops outside of the TARDIS. I think he's able to say something, but these guys have no interest in some old white guy, so they just shoot him down.
Yeah, it's quite an unfortunate way. In some ways, it's not really how he goes at all. He technically dies late in the movie, but
but it's like the, I guess, cracks.
The instigating factor.
Yeah, and this is, I guess, where the movie starts to get, I don't know, somewhat. It's sort of wonky before, but it just becomes sort of strange. I guess before going on further into the plot, I do want to mention that even though this seems like a weak way for the Doctor to go out, especially this Doctor, it's still better than what they unfortunately did with Colin Baker going into McCoy.
This is true, although technically speaking, it's McCoy going into McCoy.
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I was just going to say, at least they got McCoy back here to film these scenes, so it wasn't like McGann needed to. I don't even know how McGann would possibly dress up as McCoy, but at least they got McCoy back here so he could make this prep here. So I appreciated that.
Yeah, I know there's never going to be a conclusion on to how the best way to do this movie would have been, but I do appreciate them bringing McCoy back because I do think it gives the actual real continuity. Whereas when the 2005 Revival series started with Christopher Eccleston, we didn't get real continuity references to any, I guess we technically get Sarah Jane. And I suppose you could argue, even as far back as Aliens in Land in World War III, we got a mention that the Doctor worked for UNIT at one point. So there were these small things, but on the whole, I'm not convinced there were any real continuity references to the Doctor actually having been a different person and actually showing it on screen until what? The Cyberman Easter special?
Yeah, that'd be what, the next Doctor?
Yeah, the next Doctor. I know there were a couple of pictures in Human Nature Family of Blood. I think that was technically the very first time. And then, of course, there's the famous scene in The 11th Hour, which is still one of the best Doctor introductions. Yeah, the show was very cagey, and I get it, and this movie kind of shows why it's complicated, because you want to respect the fact that the show has existed, and the only reason this movie's being made is because the show existed. But on the other hand, you're making the show for new people, especially an American audience, who maybe haven't seen or know anything about Doctor Who, so they're going to be wondering, wait, how's this happening? Why is this happening? It's basically an impossible situation.
Yeah, and not only that, but then now the history behind the show, like, they might be wondering, well, who the House of the Master and the House of Scow and what's a Gallifrey?
And they get none of those answers.
Yeah, so it's not easy. It's possible that, honestly, they did the best they could have with the time period they were in. I don't know, but I don't entirely blame them. It's just sort of awkward more than anything.
I think there's no way this could have been a little bit of a mess. I think it's literally an impossible story to write with finesse. And one last thing before you move on, I will say, and I can't remember the name of the story off the top of my head, but I know there is an audio that has done real justice to the Sixth Doctor's regeneration into the Seventh.
His final days or something like that. Yeah.
Something to that effect.
So yeah, the Doctor gets shot, and this is my first real critique about the movie, and it's behind the character of Chang Li. We don't know as an audience why Chang Li and his friends, he was with two friends, both of his friends got shot and killed. We don't know why they were being shot at. I'm going to assume they stole something or messed around with the gang, but we never saw that. We just saw Chang Li and two friends running down the street and then coming across this gang who I guess set a trap for them. In sort of a silly scene, in my opinion. I mean, it was played out dramatically, but these people just like pop out of an alley and it's just sort of awkward. Then these people just try to shoot down Chang Li and his friends, and we never know why.
Yeah, so it's interesting to note that I know the back calls it a gang gun battle, but and very well Chang Li and his friends could have been in the gang. We see that they're completely strapped. They had guns on them. So, now you could say, hey, it's San Francisco, anybody does. But I don't know. Like, Chang Li is a very, very confusing character, and I don't understand him. And maybe it's a good thing that Big Finish does have the rights to him, because I don't get him, and I'm not sure what they could do with him. He is obviously involved enough in this type of gang, whatever it is, to have a gun and willingly shoot at these people who, to be fair, are shooting at him. I get that. But he also, well, his two friends or dad, who I assume he was pretty close to, he seemed to get along with them very well in the 30 seconds we saw him with them. Minute, maybe. But his friends or dad, he never mentions them again throughout the movie. We actually never see any of his home life. We don't see his family. We don't see where he lives. We see nothing about him except his own person. He takes around while an ambulance comes and gets the Doctor's body, but apparently no one's concerned about the bodies of his friends. And there was only one ambulance. There was no question about the gunfire, either in regard to the Doctor, who the ambulance is picking up, I'll point out. And even a PM or paramedic, they can tell what a gunshot is, I would assume. Any golden code. And again, no mention of the two dead corpses over there. Just maybe they were behind the trash bags and the paramedic didn't see them. Whatever. There were no police there. And you could say, oh, it's a gang-ridden part of town. The police would just take longer to get there.
I guess it's also possible the ambulance got there before the police. And
that's not how it happens.
I mean, I guess it depends on... I really don't know. I think the main issue is that Chang Li doesn't really have a consistent personality as far as we can see. Like, he seems like an okay guy because he stays with the Doctor who gets shot sort of... It's not Chang Li's fault. He's not the guy who did the shooting or that shooting. It's not Chang Li's fault, but I guess he feels it's somewhat of his responsibility. So he stays with the Doctor through the ambulance ride, just makes up a name, John Smith, on the admission form. On a side note, worth mentioning that scene, I believe one of the ambulance, it might have even been Eric Roberts' character, but there's a line where he's going, he about to be rich.
Yeah, because we have great healthcare in the United States. Yeah, I don't have any healthcare right now. So yeah,
I'm going to take this 40 seconds out and just say the U.S. is a terrible country in terms of healthcare. And
in so many, much more. But
yeah, and it doesn't really, it's not something that surprises many people. If you live in Europe, almost anywhere in Europe, to be honest, or many other countries, you probably have generally better healthcare than we have in the USA, at least better than the average individual in the USA. I have a friend in Australia who gets very cheap healthcare. He doesn't have to worry about it. And when I talk about have not seen a doctor in 10 years, just blows his mind. So that line about, oh, where the Doctor's going, he better be rich. That line, I mean, it's real, but talk about that line that just pisses me off.
Yeah, also it's kind of funny. If the Doctor's in the UK, one, he wouldn't be in medical debt after getting out of the hospital from a thing like this.
Yeah, it's really bad luck the Doctor landed in San Francisco, or honestly anywhere besides it. It happens now. I thought that TARDIS took him where he needed to be, but Well,
Yeah,
fuck him, I guess.
the TARDIS just wanted to get you Paul McGann. It wanted the smooth-looking younger guy.
Maybe
Not,
that's where
not,
he
not,
needed to be, though.
yeah, not the old grody Sylvester McCoy. But yeah, for the record, we are a month out from, and I maybe don't going to be too specific on this, but from the shooting of a certain individual who was the CEO of a health insurance corporation in the United States. So this situation hasn't got any better.
Yeah, it's been a degrading situation for a really long time. And I think people have known about it for like decades now, and it's never gotten better. You can vote Democrat as much as you want. It's not helping. So I'm hoping that there's more awareness going on, but awareness doesn't really matter if there's not action behind it.
And I'll take any action we can get, and I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, that is the safest thing to say.
If you have other takes, I have a personal treaty.
I was just going to say my favorite video game character is Luigi, and that's all I've got to say.
But the hospital is actually important because that's where we meet I don't know if we call them a companion, but the companion-like character for this story, Dr. Grace Holloway.
Yeah, and I think this is a very, interesting look. I guess comparing the 96 movie to what we later get when Russell T Davies showruns the 2005 revival. Because Dr. Grace Holloway, she is a medical doctor, a surgeon. She lives in quite a nice looking, I don't know if you want to call it I guess it was a house, but it looks sort of lofty. It's very roomy. And I guess she was also living with a boyfriend. So I guess they probably shared finances. But to be fair, if she's a surgeon...
Yeah, if she's a surgeon, she can handle it.
No, she herself would actually have a lot of medical school debt that she's still working on paying off. She's still moderately young. So I imagine she's only been out of medical school for let's just say 5-6 years. So God knows she has to pay some interest for the next 50 years of her life. But
well, that's possible. But keep in mind, she is working at a for-profit hospital. It's very possible if she was as good as I hated this. Her nickname in the hospital. Her nickname in the hospital was Amazing Grace.
I actually forgot about that until you just saw it, and I cringed. That was hideous. I think it only came up once, but
it was literally only once.
But yeah, unfortunately, once is too many times.
It really was. I don't know. I didn't like that. But so if she apparently is that good, maybe the for-profit hospital, and the fact that there are for-profit hospitals, by the way, unacceptable. But anyway, maybe the hospital paid down some or even all of her debt, just so they could get her to work for them.
It's certainly possible, and it's certainly not out of the question either. And she's we can assume, generally middle-class to upper-middle-class surgeon. And I think the very first scene we get with her, she's out in college. She is watching an opera. She's at an opera house, literally watching an opera.
And not only is she watching the opera, she is emotionally responding to it because we see her tearing up.
Yeah, she's crying because the opera's #emotional. It's very, well, I guess I can say it this way. It's very unrelatable to the common person. I don't know the percentages, and I don't know if there are percentages, but the percentage of the American population who've actually been to and seen an opera, I have to imagine it's somewhat low. I'm talking as high as 15% maybe. I guess if you live in a big city like New York, you might have more opportunity.
But how are you going to go do it? I don't know what they cost. I'd assume it's not cheap.
Yeah, I feel sort of bad for saying this because I feel like a Republican in Aaron Sorkin West Wing universe. But the average American would much prefer a baseball game over going to an opera. And I just think it's anything wrong with enjoying opera on the side note, but it's just not relatable to most people.
Yeah, you have to keep in mind, and I'm the one who was just thinking about this out throughout the movie, the very next on-screen doctor we get, their companion is a 19-year-old girl who works at a shop in London who lives in a council estate.
With her mother.
Because she's 19. Of course she can't afford her own apartment. Nobody can. I'm never going to be able to own my own house. And I'm in my 30s. So Rose is one of the most relatable companions. And I know that there's people who, Martha is more interesting. Martha's about the companion. And I get that. And I get the whole Martha was mistreated by the 10th Doctor. Because she was. That's not disputable. But in terms of relatability, I have never related more to a companion than I have with Rose. Yes, funnily enough, I don't work in a clothing shop, but I work in a grocery store. So that's very relatable to me. You can see in the very short montage we get before the store blows up, we just see her just going through the day. I have to say it's an amazing opening. We discussed it a while ago, but Rose is such an amazing introduction to the character of Rose. It's a very good example of what Rose's life is. And to be fair, this is a very good example of what Grace's life is, except Grace is quasi, I'm not going to call her pretentious. I'm not even going to call her elitist, but I will say I find it very hard to relate to her.
Yeah, she's definitely privileged. Like
Privileged, that's beyond this. I guess you could say, oh, you don't know how she got through medical school.
Yeah, I mean, it's entirely possible she came from a lower class family and I guess fought her way through. But that's like a fairy tale for most people nowadays. So at the very least, putting aside any pretensions behind watching opera, at the very least she's privileged. And she might realize it, she might not. It doesn't really play a part, it doesn't really matter, because aside from this, Grace only appears a handful of times in Doctor Who media. I think she pops up in like a comic book story with Paul McGann. It sort of explores the idea of that she's just not really cut out to be a full-time companion. And because of that story, I understand. I actually would consider her like an actual companion. She did travel in the TARDIS at least once with the Doctor, so something.
I mean, the thing about Grace, and I know she appeared a couple of times. I don't remember the names of the stories. I think one was a 90s 8th Doctor comic story, maybe early 2000s. Another one was very possibly the tie-in to the whole Adam coming back and kidnapping companions arc.
What's that, Endgame?
Well, that was the name of the last part of the story, but I don't remember what the whole story was. I'm sure we'll have a picture of one that covers up on screen right now. But either way, she has that small amount of appearances. But it is interesting to note what you were saying in relation to the privilege aspect. The other quasi-companion in this episode was somebody who almost certainly never gone to an opera in his life. And again, we don't see his home, but he's running around with a gun and in maybe a gang. So I'm going to assume he's not privileged. So this actually would have been an amazing time. Or maybe if they had the rights to these characters and were able to maintain rights, maybe do a Jargon Lightfoot with these two. Because that would actually give them both amazing chances to try to relate to each other in terms of life experience. Now, they're not as interesting as Jargon and Lightfoot, but nonetheless.
Yeah, it would have been interesting to see them. It never came up in the movie as far as I can remember, but when Chang, Lee, and Grace meet each other, they meet each other a handful of times throughout the movie, to talk about the socioeconomic differences, and obviously they would have phrased it that way. But it would have been interesting to see, and that never really comes up. And it's disappointing. I mean, I get it. It's not the point, and they only have, like an hour and a half to make a TV movie and try to get a series to come in after it. And they don't to bog it down with politics. But I think it's actually a legitimately interesting idea, and they just had none of that here. And like, I guess to finish off with, I'm not saying Grace is like a bad companion. She's just not remotely relatable. And to be fair, you could say that about a lot of classic Who companions who don't have a ton of character. But Grace actually did have some character, and the character we got isn't character I care much for. So
yeah, Grace is very comparable, in fact, to Dr. Leah Sa, of course, first companion to the Third Doctor during the first season of the Third Doctor's time with the unit.
Yeah, I tend to find Liz a lot more likable. Maybe if there had been a scene with Liz went to go see the opera, I would have issues with her.
Yeah, Liz was kind of snappy with the Brigadier, and that always made her slightly charming. She had a style to her that I don't think Grace quite got. I don't think she was able to play off of anybody quite the way Liz was able to.
Yeah, so it's unfortunate, and that's not to take anything away from Daphne Ashbrook, who I think is, as far as performance, I think probably fine actress, but I just didn't think much for the character she was playing. And the other thing with Grace is the whole romantic aspect that this movie throws in.
And I swear it only throws it in because it's an American movie.
Yeah, because a movie's not a movie without romance, am I right?
You're not right. But yeah, and we're going to discuss that a small bit later, and that's sure to discuss it now.
Well, yeah, I guess to finish setting up the scene, Seven's Doctor is shot, taken to the hospital. Grace attempts to perform surgery, but she has complications. The Doctor has 2 hearts. She's trying to insert some type of tube, and it's complicated because he has 2 hearts. His physiology is different. So he actually dies on the operating table. Grace is she's sort of pissed off. She thinks mistakes were made. It's not, I don't blame her. She was the one doing the surgery. She knows something's wrong. No one's listening to her. And the Doctor eventually regenerates. It took a bit, it was a bit botched, I imagine, possibly because of the medications and stuff, all the different things thrown into his system.
Yeah, the anesthetics.
Yeah. So it takes him probably, I don't know, 4 or 5 hours to regenerate, something like that. And I do want to talk a bit about that scene because it always struck me as an awkward scene because we see a morgue attendant named, what was it, Pete, who we see a couple of times throughout the movie. He seems like a fun guy. He's actually legitimately, I would be okay with him being a companion. He seemed fun. He's watching the 1931 Frankenstein, and it's sort of juxtaposing the monster coming to life in the 1931 classic movie with the Doctor's regeneration. We see like the hands twitching at the same time, and as I think it was Colin Clive's character in the movie, as he's shouting, "It's alive! It's alive!" We see the Doctor come back to life, and it was such a strange juxtaposition. Like, I don't know why they would try to compare Mary Shelley's Frankenstein with a Doctor's regeneration. It just always struck me as odd. Like, that's not really a comparison I mentally ever made. And the fact that this movie went that direction, I don't entirely get.
The only thing I can think of is it is the very quickest and easiest thing to show an American audience. Hey, look, they come back to life too, like Frankenstein's monster did. And they probably could have gotten away with doing it with Jesus.
So the Doctor comes back to life, and because it was a bit of a botched regeneration, and to be fair, anytime the Doctor regenerates, there's always some issues immediately afterwards. Meaning the Christmas invasion, he slept like probably a day straight. So there's always some issues following regeneration.
This is true, although I would point out some people have theorized that maybe a lot of these issues, and maybe some of this comes from the novelizations, I don't know, but some people have theorized that these issues affected the Eighth Doctor more because he wasn't in the TARDIS while it happened. That he didn't get the privilege of being near the TARDIS, and of course has a lot of connection with the TARDIS, and maybe the TARDIS helps smooth these things over a small little bit.
Yeah, so
he didn't get that.
It eases that transition. I mean, he was just outside the TARDIS, so I could have pulled him back if I had wanted, but what else? So the Doctor regenerates. He is now Paul McGann. He has a toe tag on his foot because he was in the morgue, and he has no memory of who he is or why he is or how he got there or why he's there. So he's stumbling from the morgue to the hospital. He winds up in like a disused portion of the hospital. Hashtag question mark. I honestly don't know. It's really, in my opinion, just trains series of events, but just go watch it like 30-second clip in the movie. He's like walking down a nice highway, and then he's instantly in like this completely decrepit building. No idea how he got there.
Maybe he went to the Sand Hair universe. I don't know. It feels something like that. It was such a difference.
I don't blame McGann for this, and some of this might sound like I'm making fun of him, but just some of his dialogue isn't great because he's like looking in the broken mirror. And to be fair, it's a cool scene. We'll probably show it because it looks nice. It's really good imagery.
You know, it looks amazing.
He's saying like, "Who am I? Who am I?" And it's just so utterly dramatic, and you can see
hilarious.
It would go beautiful into a commercial break. Yeah, it just seems way over the top. And to be fair, it's not like classic Who wasn't over the top, but it has a different vibe to it. It just feels different. This doesn't feel like the next season of Doctor Who following McCoy's time. It feels different. And that scene might have been pleasing to watch in the late 80s, but it just feels like way over the top and silly in 96.
I mean, it feels worse in 2025.
That is true. So while the Doctor is trying to recall who he is, what he is, why he is, how he is, the Master, like we said some time ago, he escaped. He's in an ectoplasmic primordial form, and he is able to sort of possess one of the individuals who was in the ambulance that actually picked up the Doctor. He was sort of able to, I think, get into the guy's jacket, and then from his jacket, he sort of jumped into the guy. This guy being Eric Roberts, who I have to admit, his rendition of the Master amused me to no end. The Master's always been sort of a, I don't know, hammy character in majority of classic Who. He always had such an aura to him. I do think Eric Roberts did a pretty good job with some of that character trait.
Yeah, I believe the character, the paramedic driver, I think his name is Bruce. I don't know if I ever gave a last name. All I know is Bruce. But one, Eric Roberts, he just looks recognizable. When I first saw him, I was thinking, oh, okay, Eric Roberts. is from a music video by the Killers. I forget which song it was. Was it when you?
I would assume Mr. Brightside.
Oh yeah, Mr. Brightside, that music video. He plays a very prominent person in that music video, and he just looks so suave, and he has a look to him. I don't know how to put it beyond that. When you see him, you look at him and you know, okay, that's Eric Roberts.
Off the top of my head, I can think of many roles that Eric Roberts has done, but I do know he's, at least at the time, he's a moderately big actor. To a lot of people, he's a recognizable name, and I think he had a lot of charm with what he was doing here. I mean, it's corny, but I do think it has a lot of charm, like a gold type of corniness.
You know, it's very camp gay, which is funny because that's how the Master's been kind of portrayed, certainly ever since in the Reviver series, and you could argue most of the classic series as well. Maybe in the classic series he's more of a straight camp gay, but either way, you can kind of see that from him. And in this movie, when he's walking around with that leather jacket and those sunglasses on, I mean, could you imagine Raj Delgado being directed? Hey, that's how you're going to look. You're going to walk around in that.
He would look pretty cool like that. That would have been a nice look. So the Master has this whole thing about how he wants to, I guess, take the Doctor's body and I guess take the rest of the Doctor's regenerations because the Master is on his last regeneration. He can't regenerate anymore.
To be fair, he's way past that. He was on his last regeneration as early as the Deadly Assassin, I think, if not early.
Yeah, I will admit to not knowing the Master's history. I've seen pictures online that go through his incarnations, and there's just some things that either I just don't know about or I just don't understand. The Eric Roberts, well, I'm not even getting into it.
But yeah, for the record, Eric Roberts has some big fitness ideas as the Master.
Yeah, which is fascinating. Yeah. So the Master wants the Doctor's body, which, hey, just like Power of the Doctor. Master wanted the Doctor's body, and hey, he got it there.
Hey, it's Paul McGann. Maybe I want the Doctor's body.
So he sort of tricks Chang Li. See, that's how unmemorable he is. I had to look up his name. He tricks Chang Li into thinking that the Doctor's a bad guy, and that the Doctor, I guess, stole his body, and the Master is the good guy, and he wants to get his body back. And he sort of tricks Chang Li with gold. He gives him, I guess it's technically gold dust. And he says, oh, hey, what do you want? $1 million, $2 million? I can give you a bunch of shit, bro. And Chang Li's like, oh, house, yeah, I need to get out of San Fran. Let's do this.
It was just funny. That's why it's so confusing to peg down Chang Li's morality. Because we see him doing a very kind thing when he didn't have to. Staying with the Doctor. Staying in the hospital while the Doctor's being operated on. Throughout the entire process, he's just resting in the visitor section of the hospital. But the second he's told the Doctor dies, he just tears the Doctor's stuff and runs off with it.
He just takes his possessions and bolts, and it's sort of funny. We never get a great hang on Chang Li's character. It's just disappointing. I guess in the end it doesn't matter. He's like a footnote in the history of Doctor Who that no one cares about, so it's whatever. Honestly, a lot of the rest of this movie, it's pretty easy to summarize. I mean, well, I guess easy to summarize is a bit much, but pretty much the Doctor hooks up with Grace. Well, actually more than one way. He finds Grace. Grace takes him home once she realizes, oh, hey, this is the same guy I operated on. David face, but 2 hearts. That's not normal, bro. Naturally, Grace is having difficulty believing this at first, but she checks he has 2 hearts. You can't fake that.
They're not just giving that away.
They're not giving that. You ain't lying. So she's interested. You can't blame her. She's a doctor. She finds what seems to be like a magical miracle type thing. And to be fair, she also just lost her job. So she might also be looking for a new way to make some coin, but that might not have been foremost on her mind at the time. The Doctor and Grace are sort of building somewhat of a relationship. Grace is starting to trust the Doctor, but the Doctor is still having problems. I think it eventually clicks who he is. Was that like immediately after the Master opened the Eye of Harmony?
I think it must have been.
And great job, Master.
Yeah, that's probably what triggered it. But it was, I think, one of the best scenes, or at least a very memorable scene with Paul McGann, where he's talking about he was laying on the grass on Gallifrey, looking up at the moons. And it was very nice. In fact, I think they used the exact type of framing for when the 10th Doctor talks about Gallifrey as well. And it's just a nice scene. And then these suits are so nice. Then he just runs off. He's a bit manic.
Yeah.
He's not out there.
I do like that. And like the first time he kisses Grace, I don't even blame him. It's like a spoiler moment Like, it's not even romantic so much as it is excitement. That doesn't bother me. Then, of course, at the end of the movie, he kisses Grace again. That's where I have problems, but that's neither here nor there. And what we get is, I don't even know if I can necessarily explain the Master's plan. He opens the Eye of Harmony in the cloister room. And the cloister room, if I recall, is at least the cloister bars have been mentioned. I'm not sure if the cloister room itself has necessarily been mentioned before, but it looks pretty fucking cool. Like James said, the whole TARDIS has sort of a gothic aspect to it. Like there are stone arches. The cloister room literally has like leaves strewn on the ground. It looks hardcore. The Master opens the Eye of Harmony. If you're wondering what the Eye of Harmony is, I guess it's like the power of the TARDIS or something. I don't know. Master opens the Eye of Harmony for some reason. Don't remember why.
Because he wanted to bring the Doctor and trap him, and somehow, as you said earlier, pull a power of the Doctor for
Body switch type thing, I guess.
Yeah, like years in advance.
Yeah, so when he opens the Eye of Harmony, I guess technically he tricks Cheng Li into doing it because a human eye opens it, which is funny because we sort of referenced that, or we talked a little bit about that in, what was that?
Yeah, and the Apocalypse element. The Big Finish one sign Colin Beggy, which I'm almost positive they wrote that scene in where Evelyn has her eye put in to stop the dogs from advancing throughout Gallifrey. I'm pretty sure they wrote that just to kind of smooth over this issue.
Yeah, just to explain a little bit, because the Doctor also says he's half human or something.
On his mother's side.
Yeah, on his mother's side. That's not something I don't even want to talk about, because the fuck, Bryce, you be trolling?
Yeah, I mean, we all know that he's actually from another... What? I forget what species.
Not the time this child shit. Like, I even want to think about that. That won't reply. After the Eye of Harmony is opened, apparently the molecular structure of the planet is changing, which is an exact quote from the movie. The Doctor shows Grace this is the case by sort of putting his hand in a glass window, but the glass window, instead of breaking, it's sort of like molding around his hand.
Yeah, and he can just tap through it.
Yeah, it doesn't look necessarily great in like 1990s special effects, but I don't hold it against them. I mean, they did what they could.
Yeah, I think 90s special effects kind of have a charm to them. A hideous charm, but there is a charm there.
Charm is charm. So I guess Grace is at that point, oh, hey, I guess I should listen to this guy. If we don't, I guess the world's going to be destroyed. And
from there on, the Doctor and Grace are just trying to get to this clock that has something the Doctor needs.
Yeah, an atomic clock. Funny enough, I think that's what McCoy initially was looking for at the very beginning.
Well, yeah, that's because he knew exactly how to stop the Master.
Yeah.
It's just that because of the shooting and then the death and then the memory loss, he couldn't get there until over halfway through the movie. And then you should remember, oh, well, yeah, that's what I need to do. So you can't hold it against him. It wasn't his fault. He was just really waylaid.
And we do get some fun scenes there. The Doctor and Grace sort of being stopped by police because they're trying to get through this. I think it might have been some type of car crash, and they're trying to get through. The Doctor goes to pull out the thing of Jolly Babies, but he's reaching into his pocket, and Grace has to say, hey, don't shoot him, he's British. That did crack me up.
Yeah, and we all know if there was a suit he got, what he would have gotten shot right there.
Yeah,
let's be fair. If he was anybody with modern police, he would have gotten shot right there. And
yeah,
so Grace.
I mean, San Francisco probably isn't as bad as...
Are you kidding?
Well, I'm not saying they're good, but I'm trying to remember, was it Los Angeles, the LA riots?
Oh, the LA police. Oh.
Yeah, I mean, that's like the epitome of police corruption. I think most police are generally corrupt anyway, but...
I mean, if you're talking corruption, you might want to go to some place like New York.
Yeah, New York City or Chicago, I imagine, is also quite atrocious. But I mean, I guess my point is, back in the 90s, I think one of the big things was the LA Rodney King stuff. So I just find that scene sort of funny. Like, oh, hey, he's British, just shoot him.
Yeah, I think it's funny, but I think it tries to do that thing about humanizing police, which always annoys me. And turns into like a comedy thing. And I know back then they would have been thinking about it, but we live in the day of our Lord 2025. We need to stop this police humanization. It's not healthy.
I mean, I guess technically police are humans, but it's also a corrupt,
racist
profession that is not worth respect, no admiration. And I would just not recommend people going into that industry. It's just not good for you.
Or us.
I guess that's more important, or us. So it's not like there aren't decent scenes. I mean, we have the Master fucking around with Chang Li. We have the Doctor and Grace trying to get through the atomic clock. Honestly, the only thing I want to mention in specific about the Doctor and Grace's journey is once they get to the atomic clock, there is a somewhat interesting scene I do want to just point out. They are trying to steal a component out of the clock that the Doctor needs to stop the Master's plans. And there's a security guard who notices the Grace and the Doctor, like, they're not supposed to be near the clock. He notices that they're near the clock. So he tries to stop them. And then the Doctor does this. Apparently, his regeneration gave him new abilities. He says that he knows this security guard. And he recommends that this guy's name is Gareth. And I'm looking at the script right now. He recommends he, quote, answer the second question on your midterm exam, not the third. Third may look easy, but you'll mess it up. So, giving him some advice. Apparently, he knows Gareth. Apparently, Gareth will later had the seismology unit of the UCLA task force and apparently create a system of accurately predicting earthquakes. The Doctor can look at him some years before that, recognize it as a young Gareth, and give him advice on his exams. It just...
Everything about this is confusing. Yeah, because if the Doctor knows he has that unit, then it doesn't matter if he fucks up on the question because he still has the unit and the timeline the Doctor knows.
It's strange. It's almost... I mean, you could make the case that maybe the Doctor just recognizes his face as a famous guy in human history. But this is what it feels like. It feels like the Doctor can look at you and see your future. That's what it feels like in the movie.
I feel like that's what they're trying to play up like.
Well, actually, and he does the same thing with Grace. He implies that he knows what Grace's future is. It feels really bizarre, and we don't see it again. As far as I know, we don't see it again. Maybe, I mean, we have it right in the EDAs. Maybe it comes up.
Maybe the Eighth Doctor just has the Susan sense of psychicness.
Well, that is true. Yeah, it must run in the farm. He has some strong looms there, farm.
Do not even get started on the looms.
Hashtag longbow, let's do this.
Hashtag $400, let's do this.
Long story short, Doctor finally meets up with the Master. We do get a pretty funny scene after the Doctor is trapped and tied down. The Master, Eric Roberts' Master, comes out in full Time Lord Gallifreyan regalia. It's funny. He looks pretty beast.
He always dresses for the occasion.
I liked it. That's what I said earlier on. The movie's a mess, and it's sort of a really awkward time in Doctor Who history. And I would even say the movie's particularly good, but there are certainly amusing moments like that sort of make it worth it.
If you watch this movie while high, you might have the best experience in your life.
Yeah, I don't think I've been able to have the experience. Well, I'm pretty sure I haven't. So that might be something worth looking forward to. And honestly, when it comes to the finale of the movie, I don't know about you, but by that point, I sort of largely lost interest. It's like generic action that, I don't know, I just didn't care that much about.
I don't know if I lost interest so much as I lost the plot. I still don't really quite understand how what was happening was going to destroy the Earth.
I mean, I guess if the molecular structure was changing, that's probably not good.
Yeah, but I don't know how it was happening. Like, I don't really get that. I'm not quite sure how the Doctor, or really Grace, was able to stop it. Something, what was the reference to a microwave or an alarm clock? I guess the idea was to reset the TARDIS to before it started happening. I know the movie did a better job of explaining it. They didn't do good enough of a job, at least for me. It felt extremely messy, the ending section. And to be fair, a lot of Doctor Who is always great with the sci-fi, ironically enough. Yeah, I don't know. It felt messy to me.
Yeah, so spoilers, Grace and Chang Li die. Spoilers, they come back, because I guess the TARDIS likes them.
Well, because the TARDIS were 3 days in the past, and 3 days in the past they were alive.
Yeah, well...
I think that was part of it.
Yeah, it's probably what... I don't know. Then they saved the world, and people get to do the countdown. Pete got to do a countdown at the party.
Yeah, and I guess the Master falls into the Eye of Harmony.
Yeah, he falls into the Eye of Harmony, so he's all fucked up. And Bob's your uncle, pretty much. Oh, and the Doctor kisses Grace again to celebrate the New Year's. That's the movie, guys. Yeah, what we have with the Doctor Who movie is some interesting ideas. I think we can say it's certainly a movie that tried.
It tried something.
It tried something. I don't think it succeeded, but hey, they put in some effort. Like I said, it's amusing to watch at times. It's only like an hour and a half. I mean, it's probably about the same length as any normal classic. Let me phrase, as many classic Who stories of the 4-episode stylings.
Actually, I think most of those were 140, so it's actually, sadly, it's shorter than most of them.
Which is good because it's not as entertaining as most of them, so I'm okay with that. I guess my point being, if you've seen a decent amount of classic Who and you haven't seen the movie, might as well give it a go. I mean, it's not good, but certainly I do think there certainly worse things out there for Doctor Who.
Nowadays, that's certainly true.
You look at a lot of modern day stories, what maybe a fifth of them just don't hit right, and that might be over exaggeration, but it's not uncommon to see a story not feel entirely like just throwing one out, Robert of Sherwood, which I've only seen once. Don't remember it particularly well. Maybe I'll enjoy it next time I see it.
Some people actually swear by that one.
It may indeed be very good. Maybe in a couple of years I'll be eating my words. But my point being, I don't think the Doctor Who movie is terrible. I'm not saying it's an awful movie, but it's certainly not a good movie. So yeah, entertaining but not good.
And I would even go as far to say that it's not even a good Doctor Who movie as well.
That's also quite probable. I mean, some aspects were interesting. I just wish the execution had been done better. But at the same time, this is something that they tried to do in '96. It just didn't work out. It's not Paul McGann's fault. It's not the writer's fault. It just didn't work out. It was at the time. And honestly, it's probably a good thing it was at the time. It's trying to imagine what the stage would have been like in the mid to late '90s.
Yeah, instead of the 2005 revival.
Yeah, it's probably a good thing it didn't necessarily work out. I mean, it's hard to say. You never know. But at least, I mean, this movie sort of led into the 8th Doctor adventure range, which is very popular book range. And it probably wasn't this movie itself. But I mean, 3 years after this movie came out, or even a year after this movie came out, Big Finish started releasing their own material. So certainly it led to maybe an increased popularity. Like, hey, this didn't work out, but at least we can do some audios, and naturally we see how popular Big Finish audios are.
Yeah, that's true. I do wonder how much of a connection that was, because they couldn't even use Paul McGann.
Yeah, not at first, but even having McCoy in the movie, obviously the first, I guess we listened to it recently again, but Sands of Time, bringing back McCoy, Davison, and Bege. I could see it potentially increasing the interest, even if it didn't work out. So I think more than anything, it's a curiosity of Doctor Who history that luckily is now more widely available than it has been in the past. Especially, well, like us, if you're living in the USA, I imagine people in the UK had much easier access to it for a long time.
Although I think the people in the UK might have had an edited version.
Oh yeah, I think something about the editing the deaths early on in the Gangland Gun battle.
Yeah.
So I mean, not that it makes a big difference. But yeah, obviously you'd always prefer the more complete version if possible. But yeah, honestly, about the movie, that's pretty much how I feel about it. Like, more than anything, I think it's just a strange and curious time in Doctor Who history. But there's also, as always, we try to do the whole timeline thing. So if, James, you were to jump into that, I know you have like a nice little spiel.
But it's a great spiel. I walked 2 minutes on it. Well, as listeners to this podcast know that how this wiki, and make sure you use the right one, they've been down for a bit, but they have a mail wiki app right now, so hey, I'll go with things. The TARDIS wiki is a personal timeline for each Doctor, including the extensive extended media ranging from the comic books, comic strips, Big Finish and BBC audio, the multiple book ranges, and everything in between. Doctor Who canon, insofar as it has one, is a jumbled mess. So it's just fun to see where the stories we're discussing fit into the universe as a whole, as continuity in the narrative timeline has always been of interest to me. And this is no different, because this movie came out during the Wilderness years, which is more interesting than it actually probably ended up being. The Wilderness years was basically the space in between Survival, the last story starring Sylvester McCoy in 1989, and in some ways, the 2005 revival, yes, this never led anywhere. So really, this is still just the median part of the Wilderness years in many ways. But there were 2 book ranges that were very popular before the TV movie came out, both done by Virgin, a British book publisher. And they had the Mission Adventures, which was featuring stories from Doctors 1 through 6. And they also had the new adventures, which featured the Seventh Doctor continuing straight on from survival in a more adult, more high concept type of way than what the show certainly ever did on the whole. And so this movie comes along right in the middle of all of that. So right before on the timeline for the 8th/7th Doctor, right before this is technically the TV movie, which is not the same thing as this. I'm talking about the 2021 novelization of this movie, written by Gary Russell, who, funnily enough, also wrote the original novelization of this movie in 1996, which is why I said earlier that this movie had two novelizations. And I don't know why Gary Russell wrote both. I don't know why there needed to be a second one. On the TARDIS wiki, the name for the original novelization is just the novel of the film. But point is that in the 2021 novelization, there is a prelude section where the Doctor is asked to gather the Master's remains, which in this movie, it said the Master requests the Doctor to do it. In that novel, it says the Time Lords asked the Doctor to do it. It's Doctor Who. That's going to happen. Welcome to it. But realistically, ignoring the idea of counting a prelude to the novelization of the movie we're discussing, which is a bit of a mess, there was also, in realistic terms, the 12-part audio story from Big Finish, The Last Day, featuring Sylvester McCoy, which was part of the 7th Doctor Adventures range. It was the 14th and 15th release because it was 12 parts. Part 1 was 6 parts. Part 2 was also 6 parts. Part 1 came out December 2023, and the second part came out June 2024, which is pretty recent for us recording. And this would have been Sylvester McCoy, as the story says, on the quote-unquote last day, a 12-part epic right before the movie takes place, which, again, we've not listened to this one. It's way too new for us to have listened to or got to yet. But from the small reading I did researching it, it sounds fascinating. And I don't think you can go wrong with a 12-part epic from Sylvester McCoy. Right after this movie, and I mean right after, literally the movie ends with the 8th Doctor picking up the time machine. And this book, The 8 Doctors, starts with the Doctor finishing the time machine. The 8 Doctors was the first novel in the BBC 8th Doctor Adventures range, and the novel came out June 1997, written by Terence Dicks, a long-time Doctor Who writer from the classic series. And this novel, which we own, and we're probably showing a picture on screen right now, I cannot tell you how much I'm looking forward to reading it. I've glanced through it a bit, but I haven't sat down and started yet because we wanted to talk about this movie first. But don't be surprised if within the next few videos we have, we're talking about this novel. I'm not making promises, but it's coming. And so this novel takes place right after the movie, and I am sure that it's going to maybe not fix things, but it's going to feel a lot more like proper Doctor Who than perhaps what this movie felt like. And I think it's going to be exactly what Paul McGann would need. And so I'm looking forward to reading The 8 Doctors.
I've been interested in that one just because it picks up immediately from the movie. So given that we just saw the movie, it's fresh in mind. It should be fun to read. But when it comes to this 96 movie, final thoughts, I guess all I can say is it's okay. Like, it's not a good movie. It's definitely not a great movie. But I honestly don't think it's terrible. Like James said, it might be a bad Doctor Who movie. But it's like a movie overall, it's fine. It's entertaining at times. I do think Eric Roberts' rendition of the Master is hammy and fun. Certainly, I think Paul McGann has moments where he seems like at least a possibly decent Doctor. And like I said, we see more of that later in Night of the Doctor. So, yeah, it's a massive movie. Sometimes confusing near the end. Not something I particularly want to watch again anytime soon, but, it's okay. And I guess that's sort of my thoughts on the movie.
My thoughts are much the same. I find the movie a mess, but it's a fun mess, and one that you should. It's only an hour 30. Just take the time to watch it. If you don't want to get the DVD, which I get, it's probably out of print by now, pirate it. Do however you need to. It's maybe even on Internet Archive. It seems like anything is now these days. Just don't expect much. But it is a very interesting, fascinating piece of Doctor Who history that is worth the watch. Because there's never going to be anything like this again. I don't think there ever could be something like this again. We only got this one, and this is the one we're going to get. So, yeah, it's okay. I don't know if there is one. There might be, I'm not sure. If there was an 8th Doctor Paul McGann audio with Eric Roberts as the master he was dealing with, I'd be fascinated by that. No, technically speaking, Eric Roberts' body, the Bruce body he took over, was kind of deteriorating. So I'm not sure how that would work out. But like I said earlier, that master has some audios. So obviously, he somehow keeps the body. It's the master, that's how he rolls. He defies logic. Yeah, so I think those two would play off each other pretty well. And for the scene we got between them, I thought they did pretty well playing off each other. They kind of both steal the show. The other people in the movie were on the whole, Grace and Chang Li were just on the whole kind of okay, but forgettable. Like, you're not going to be worried or wondering, oh, I can't read any more Grace things. I'm so sad. No one's going to have that feeling. Unless, I suppose, you like operas. In which case, I'm sorry you listened to this. But either way, it was okay. Which is maybe the most damning response to the movie one could have, considering they wanted this to jumpstart a new series. But alas, that did not happen. And as Margo said earlier, perhaps that was for the battle.
That's just our thoughts about this one, though. If you have other thoughts, different thoughts, certainly if you were fan watching back in the 90s when this aired, I can imagine it feeling so fresh and exciting for you. So, yeah, please let us know what you thought about this one. And I guess before we go, James, what did we have coming up next?
Up next, we have very controversial novel. Not the most controversial, but one of the more controversial ones. The Man in the Velvet Mask, which was the 19th novel in the Virgin Missing Adventures series, which, as I said previously, featured adventures from the first 6 Doctors in the individual books of the series. This one happens to be starring the first Doctor with companion Dodo, which is already interesting. And this was written by Daniel O'Mahony, which, hey, he has the classic spelling of our name.
Yeah, we should have been the Brothers Mahoney, but it's okay.
Yeah, technically speaking, that is the...
Yeah, it's the traditional spelling that Mahoney has. That I guess most of the Mahoney clans had back in Ireland prior to, I guess, trying to assimilate to American culture such as it is.
Yeah, but either way...
It has a charm to it.
Yes, it does. But either way, The Man in the Velvet Mask, for a couple of reasons, has been considered one of the more controversial books written. It certainly does not have a large amount of fans, but I guess we will discuss that then, because that is what we are discussing next.
Yeah, and that's certainly something to look forward to. Last thing before we leave, if you ever want to follow us, you can naturally subscribe to us on YouTube, or you could follow us on Twitter/X at Brothers Mahoney. So, yeah, if you want to, you can always reach out. This has been, I guess, our discussion on our thoughts on this sort of masterful movie. But as always, this has been Michael.
And I've been James.
Thanks for listening to this new Brothers Mahoney discussion, and we hope to see you next time.
And welcome to 2025.
God, I hope it's better than last year. Let's do this. Let's go.